Welcome into episode 5 with Ryan Oliver and myself, Connor Fenlon. Thank you to all that have listened so far. Make sure you subscribe on wherever you listen to podcasts and on our official YouTube page. Tonight, we are very fortunate to be joined by former head of strength and conditioning for Siena College, 3-time MAC champion, and author, and now the director and player development for Georgia Tech men's basketball. We know him as Dan Taylor. Some people know him as DT, but we're happy to be joined by Dan Taylor.
Actually, Connor, it's Dr. Taylor now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Taylor. Excuse me.
Well,
Put some respect on his name, please.
No.
Dr. Dan Taylor. But thank you very much for joining us, Dan.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I got my first complaint, though. And it's in the intro to the podcast. And it refers to Ryan as a Siena great, which is 100% true. But it's got to be the legend, Connor Fenlon. Like, it just sort of goes and kind of like, bro, if you are who you are, man, you got to re-edit that bit. Other than that, I'm happy to be here.
I don't like to pump my chest too much. You know, I try to give it to Ryan, who's the guy that hit all those shots, and I watched a lot of the shots after I graduated. But no, catch the Siena fans up. How's COVID been treating you and your family? Obviously since March down in Atlanta.
It's been very crazy for all the reasons everyone knows about. I was talking to Ryan right before we started recording this, and for the world and the economy and people who are duly affected, it's horrific, and I don't want to downplay that at all. And I'm very fortunate to be in a situation that I am, but for the family, to answer your question, it's been really, really good, because one of the downsides of this job is you just don't have a lot of family time. Anybody that's affiliated or understands it or has played it knows that. And so we had 3.5 months of just really, really good time together. And my kids are 9, 10, and 10, so it's a good age to interact with them. And my wife and I, we never get a lot of time together, so it was really, really, really good. And then coming out of it is just about sort of trying to be smart about our kids are going to be online for right now. How are they going to cope with that? They're doing really, really well. But in terms of the quarantine, my parents in England, healthy and doing well, my brother, and then us down here, we've had a really good quarantine. So it's been good.
No, that's awesome to hear, man. And again, tell the family I said hello.
Oh, no doubt.
Let's run it back. Let's talk about that transition coming from, Albany, New York, moving down south to Atlanta. What was your thought process? How was the transition? How was the family's transition into where you guys are now?
Yeah, it was a couple of different things. The professional part of it was initially difficult because I left Siena, where I was for almost 10 years, and kind of had built the program to where I wanted it to be, and it achieved various things. And you and Connor were part of a lot of them. So the professional bit was complicated and difficult there emotionally, but in terms of going from Siena to Georgia Tech ACC, it was kind of an easy, like, this is the right move. I'm in the right place in my career. And then family-wise, it was a little bit tricky. I had to be away from them for 6-7 weeks to move down here and get going and find a place to live and whatever. And that wasn't easy. But after that, I mean, it's the South is a really great place to live in ways I never knew. Atlanta is an unbelievable city. It's not quite the New York City of the South necessarily, but it's a big time city like that. But the vibe is very Southern and laid back, and Georgia Tech is right in the middle of it. And I love cities, always have done. And so that part was good. And we live just on the outskirts. So the suburban appeal for family and schools is really good. It's about 35 minutes in. It has LA style traffic, which I know you appreciate, Raleigh. So that's its own beat. But it was pretty good. I mean, the work side of it was interesting because I always try to operate in the mid-major level as a high major strength coach. Mm-hmm. And so, we'll probably end up talking about some of it, like some of the things that we did and ideas that, I brought to the table and how you guys responded to it. And also the type of athletes that a lot of you guys were. It hasn't been that big of a jump in respect to that. Some of the levels of what we do and how we do it and the resources that I have and what does that mean obviously changed. But it was a pretty straightforward transition for the most part, which I think speaks to my time at Siena and just how incredible my wife and my kids are, really.
Wow, that's great. What What would you say was the biggest adjustment going from the MAC to the ACC? You know, if there's one thing that you say was a big adjustment, or was it all similar? You know, athletes are athletes. It's just a little bit more,
Yeah.
obviously, a little bit more funding you might have behind you.
Yeah, I think the biggest adjustment, I'm trying to think, that's a good question. I think the first thing that I realized immediately, because we played some non-conference games with SEC teams, and obviously we had done this with Siena too, but it's a little bit different when you're down here and you're living in it. And the ACC is just such a skill-based league. And so you'll see these monstrous human beings, but if they don't have a certain level of skill, it doesn't matter. And that was an interesting sort of journey to go down. And it's true. And then the same is true in all leagues, obviously. Like the most skilled MAC teams are usually going to win it or come pretty close. But the ACC, it's a different step. So it was sort of understanding the rhythm and flow of what coach requires, the kind of athletes we were getting in regards to what I was doing. But the nuts and bolts of it, like you were saying, I mean, it really is 18-year-old competitive young, in my case now, men. And that's the same as Siena. It's the same, you know, it is how, and I think also my approach to you guys and to the current teams that I work with has always seemed to fit well. You know, I don't come in screaming, shouting, and trying to impose my will on people. It's more of a collaboration and more of a joint activity that we go through, and it ends up by years 2 and 3 and 4 becoming your program. And I think that fit really well. Other than that, I think because I work specifically with one team, specifically for one coach, that was a little bit of a big adjustment because I wasn't as spread thin, which is a really good thing professionally. But then to the magnitude of what coach needs and when, and sort of being on call 24/7 is a little bit different. So I think those things might have been the biggest thing. But the basic nuts and bolts of all of it are very, very similar.
Absolutely. And speaking of coach, how is it working with Coach Passner? How's you guys' relationship?
Yeah.
You know, what's a funny story you have? Like one of the first stories. I know you have one.
Oh God, I probably got a lot. No, he's a great guy. I mean, and I know we have to say that because we work for these guys, but he really is a good guy and he really cares. And he's young in the professional, although he's older than when he first broke in. I think he was 30 or 31 when he got the head job at Memphis. I think he's a little bit misunderstood because he's very honest and genuine in a business that doesn't always perpetuate that. And so sometimes I think people misconstrue who he is, and really how he sort of represents himself is literally how he is. I mean, there's really nothing like crazy funny that I can think of to tell you guys. Like, we got some great Coach Mac stories and whatever, but it's been a real pleasure to work for him because he very much like Coach McCaffrey just lets me do what I do, and that I think is the biggest compliment you can give your support staff, you know. And for sort of budding coaches and people that have been around coaches, and you know, with Connor's dad being such a great coach too, is that when you have that sort of relationship, when there's the trust that you can, you know, be given. And that was my thing with Coach McCaffrey. I'm going to jump around because the same thing has happened with Josh down here is, you know, Coach was at a point, Coach McCaffrey, on, I think it was his 3rd or 4th year when I took over, his 3rd year. And you have this sports car, you know, and you just give this guy the key to drive it and don't even tell him what to do with it. Just go ahead, you know. And the same thing was down here. Like Coach Pastor and I met, we had obviously meetings about his vision for it. And he just kind of let me go ahead and do it for the most part. I mean, he's a relentless texter. I mean, that's the one thing. That's hard to explain. He's relentless with that. You know, if he's stuck on something, he'll do that to the point of apologizing afterwards. But yeah, I think it's less a funny story, and it's more, I think he needs to get more credit than he does for being as genuine as he is, and that makes it easy for me to do what I do down here.
It's good. It's good, as you said, you know, in your industry, be able to have that much freedom makes your program even better, because you know how long it takes to progress, you know, with all that kind of stuff. But take us back to 2016 when you decided to make the move to Georgia Tech. What was that process like?
Well, since about 2010, 2011, I started either seeing jobs that interested me and or being contacted by people because of the things that we had, particularly obviously the championship run, but just in general, the things that we had done at Siena, and I guess my reputation a little bit in the circles. And so it was kind of always sort of floating around. And then on the Coach Pastner note is that a job at Memphis opened up in 2014, and I applied for it. And at the time, Coach Pastos kind of gave me the blessing, and he helped connect the dots a little bit to be able to speak to Josh and get me the interview. Great interview, did really, really well. Ended up coming second, which, you know, is how it is in the business. And so, you know, I came back to Siena and did the things that we did following that. But I always stayed in contact with Coach Pastner, just because I liked who he was. He and I hit it off really well. I realized he was sort of this rising young coach. And so I realized one morning that he had gotten the job at Georgia Tech, just on kind of message boards or whatever. And I had sort of routinely reached out to him, probably looking back on it, to be sort of networking smart in the business, but also because I just respected him. So it was, you know, like, you know, Happy New Year and great win and things like that. And so I reached out to him and I said, you know, congratulations, coach. I think it's a great fit for you. I'm excited for you and your family. And then sort of ... at any point in time, if, you know, you'd be interested, I would still jump at the opportunity to work for you. And within probably 3 hours, he had texted me back. And that doesn't like, it's funny if you're not in the business, because that sounds like, well, of course he would. But when coaches get jobs, they're inundated by people.
Yep.
And you guys know this because it's almost like recruiting, you know, and for him to even think to get back to me speaks to who he is and the relationship that we had forged. And so within 3 or 4 hours, he texted me back and basically said, you know, we're going to look at this position. He's like, he absolutely, you know, would be a candidate for this. And within maybe a couple of months, I was walking in the door. And so it was kind of quick in that respect. But again, as I was kind of saying before, it was harder than I thought it was going to be, having said that I was kind of looking and feeling things around for 4 or 5 years, just because of the way that I do what I do is really, it's not just about lifting weights. It's about relationships with you guys. It's about watching you guys grow up. It's about watching me grow up, for that matter. My kids came, you know, born at the Siena. The alumni come back, you know, to take it back even further. When I first came to the States, I came into upstate New York through the College of St. Rose, which is a bit of a long story, and people there helped me come over. So I was in the Albany area basically my entire sort of 18, 19 years of my beginning part of America, and all of a sudden I'm leaving. And then the other part of it is, and I shout out to John D'Argenio for just being sort of okay with this, but the nature of moving to the Power 5 is, you know, Coach Pastner gives me the job on Wednesday, and I have to be there on Monday. So I have to hand my resignation in with literally a day's notice. Yeah. Now, John obviously was aware that stuff was brewing, and I always try to keep him in the loop, but that's pretty fast, even by our industry standards. And so I cried like a baby. I'll be honest with both of you guys. I don't remember if Ryan was around at that time, but you know, I was packing up and I was crying. I talked to Hammer, I'm crying. I go to the baseball field, say goodbye to Brian. And it was just, you know, 9 years of everything that we had done and built. And so that bit was really hard. You know, but, you know, as soon as I hit the road and went down here, I knew what I was coming into. I worked for 9 years to get to this point. And so, you know, the rest kind of took care of itself. So it was a mixture of sort of what we had done, what I had done at Siena, combined with networking and opportunity. And it just sort of all hit at the same moment.
No, that's the, you know, you played a special role at Siena, DT, and you know, you've gotten a couple of shout outs already on the podcast, but anyone that walked through that door with a Siena jersey knows the impact that you made there.
Hey, man.
Let's talk about, you know, you coming over from England, you going to Schenectady College. Did you think that fast forward you would have two master's degrees, a PhD, and, you know, a certificate in business analytics? Like, talk about your journey through education and how your knowledge really began and how it's continued.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was unmotivated type of student. I was just kind of like floating through. And when I first started playing basketball, which is about age 13, this is in the north of England, you know, just like you guys, that's really all I did. There wasn't, and there isn't the same sort of setup in England where you're a good high school player, or maybe you go to prep school or whatever, and then you go to college, and then it just isn't the same. There's nothing like the NCAA really in the world. as it relates to amateur sports education sort of tied together. And so I knew I wanted to come over here, and I just spent 2 or 3 years just trying to basically figure the connections out. But academically, you know, I just sort of coasted along, and it didn't. I always appreciated it because I'm from a family that respects it, and I knew that it was something that was important, but I just didn't put a ton of stock into it. So finally find a way to get over here, which again is through some connections through College of St. Rose. Essentially, one of their players that graduated was playing pro in the team that I was basically one of the junior players on, and that connection helped me get over here. And his primary connection was to the head coach of Schenectady Community College, which for those who don't know is a D3 JUCO. So I had no idea, man. I didn't know where Schenectady was. Obviously, I knew where New York was, but I didn't really understand what junior college was because it means something different in England. So, but I'm like, I'm all in, I'm going. So I go, and I think maybe because over here, you know, you have to go to school to make sure you can play, because it was just so separate in England. I would go to club teams and I would go to school. There was no connection. So I did pretty well as Schenectady academically and athletically. And that was cool. You know, that was a good thing. And then I get a Division II scholarship to go to Franklin Pierce College, now university. And again, I don't really play a whole lot there, unfortunately, but I'm doing pretty well academically. And I ended up graduating there with honors in history, and it was a cool thing. But my whole plan was always to go back to Europe and play pro, which if you see me play is somewhat amusing now. But at the time, I was all right. I was scrappy and played hard, you know. And so it was always really the athletic driving piece, which I know you guys understand, that kind of pulled me through. And then what happened is I realized I'm not going to go pro. I get married, and I decided to get into the sort of strength and conditioning fitness industry and field. And it just sort of, my worlds all sort of swirled together. And so now I've got this industry that fascinates me, and I'm competitive from basketball. So I want to be better at it. I want to know more about it. I'm a really curious person by nature. And so finding avenues to connect the dots academically became much simpler and more interesting than it did when I was in high school and I was in college, if that makes sense. So I think I had the aptitude, but I didn't really have the drive. I guess the drive is the wrong word, but I didn't really have the reason to do it. So to speed it up a little bit, because it is a long journey academically, I knew I needed to get a master's degree in the field when I was working at a gym prior to me coming to Siena as an assistant fitness director, because I wanted to move back into college sports. And I had a bit of experience playing. I had some experience training, but I had a degree in history, which is great, but has nothing to do with what I do now. And so, I find this way to get this master's degree and just knock it out of the park. And it opened doors for me, opened the opportunity to come to Siena, gave me concepts, ideas, and it just sort of kept that spring of wanting more going. Then to speed it up a little bit, one of the benefits of Siena was that they would pay for education once you'd worked there for a period of time. So a couple of years in, I realized this. I get introduced to some of the strength and conditioning practices that are happening in Australia, which are some of the best in the world. So me being me, curious, want to do really well, want to make sure I'm doing the right thing for you guys, do an online degree in through a school in Australia, again, a master's degree. So now I have these 2 master's degrees, which are the same because exercise science, but they're one's international, one's US based, so they're ideologically a little bit different. And then to sort of end it, now I'm on this sort of roller coaster of academia and, doing well professionally. But what I realized, and again, I know, both of you guys, but particularly, the type of player you were, Ryan, is the psychology of what we do sort of wins the day in everything. So whether it's schematics in basketball, like, as coaches, or whether it's Dan's going to make me lift heavy today in the weight room, the psychology behind it, like why are they doing it, the motivation strategies or whatever. If you don't understand that and you can't tap into that, the rest doesn't matter, and then you move to the ACC level where there's a ton of that. So I became super interested in that. And I don't know if you remember, Ryan, we used to do the wellness questionnaires. How did you sleep? How do you feel? What's your food? And I became so interested in that because it was such a simple thing to do. Ask you these series of questions, and when you graph it and play with it, it started to tell you about you guys more than you realized. So I got interested in this particular area of mood profiling, which essentially is questionnaires that give you an idea of what your pre-contest mood states are: happy, sad, angry, depressed, whatever. And then how you play in the game. And again, from talking to two guys that have sat in very high level locker rooms and have played, you understand that, particularly as a coach now, is that there's a certain mental state that you're in, good or bad, and it can dictate how you play. So I realized I was getting fascinated in this, and decided that, well, I'm here anyway, so if I'm going to look into this, I might as well continue my education. Found a PhD program where I could really focus on that in performance psychology, and then I just took off and went ahead and did that. And your senior year was my first year of doing it. And I was on the road with you guys. You probably barely remember. I'm in lobby.
I remember in the lobby, yeah. But
right, lobby, like, yeah.
Get work done.
Yeah, and so to kind of, I guess, answer the question, it's a mixture of all kind of things. But the one thing I tell a lot of people is, I'm obviously biased to it, but every time I've done it, every time I've taken a step forward with further education, including just coming over here, from high school to JUCO, it's opened a door for me. Or whether or something's happened, or I've met somebody or whatever, because, if I hadn't done the master's degree, it wouldn't have been difficult, but it wouldn't have been as easy for John to give me the job at Siena when he did. If I hadn't done the Australian one, I wouldn't have met certain people who have opened up other doors in areas I've come from, including writing the book, because I met a guy who knew a guy. And, the PhD, it opens up and it constantly changes the sort of story of your life every time I've done this. And so I'm a huge proponent of doing it. You get incredibly high student loan bills. That's the one side of it that no one talks about. But I think it's made me a better practitioner. If I'll backtrack, I know it's made me a better practitioner, which is really important. But I also think in terms of, professionally and personally, it just opens up tons of different areas of your life, which is important too.
Wow. That's a pretty big journey.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff I didn't even know, but now I know why you're so good
That's
at
why we're here, fan. That's why we're here, brother.
When you were talking about your playing days, when you were playing, were you into strength and conditioning? Like, did you enjoy going in the weight room? Something you liked, or?
Yeah, so that actually is the sort of beginning of all of it, because growing up, not really, not for any bad reason. It isn't something we had. We played around with it a little bit here and there. And again, I think a lot of it because it wasn't this like, good high school with a weight program, go to college weight program. We didn't have any. When I was at Schenectady, which is an unbelievable experience, including where I met my wife. So, I have very, very fond memories of it. Our sort of supportive group was going to the Y, and Schenectady Y. Talk about some funny stories, man. Woof, that place has got some stories. But you went there and you lifted downstairs on your own, and so there was really no formal way that you guys know of it, and obviously I do now. But when I went to Franklin Pierce, at the time they do now, they got some very good strength and conditioning setup now. This is years later, because I graduated in 2002. But what happened was I wasn't playing a whole lot, and it's one of those things when, and I know Ryan's like this because it's what's made him the player he is at the time, particularly, is when you can't control something. So I can't control playing time. You sort of lock into something else. I also think it's a little bit about my academic stuff too. And so for me, I wasn't playing, and we just started lifting, and I started falling in love with doing it. It was challenging. Again, the competitive part of me fell into the weights. This is more my junior year, which is my first year at the Division II school, and how I felt. Obviously, it changes your body, which is a 20-year-old is a positive thing, but how I played was different, and that was cool. So then the summer between my junior and senior year, I come back to Albany, where my wife, fiance at the time, lived, and was going to the College of St. Rose, where obviously I had some connections, and working out there. And the guy who used to be the fitness center coordinator / strength coach just sort of offhandedly said, you should be a personal trainer. And I'm like, yeah, it's whatever, it's cool. And it was because I was diligent, and I was good with people, and I was my little notebook writing stuff down. And so that basically is what started my career, this offhanded comment. But what happened that summer is I come back in the fall for my senior year. I've obviously changed physically. A couple of other guys that I was close with that were walk-ons had done a lot of it too. And so we basically took the young freshmen under our wing, and we were doing all kinds of crazy bodybuilding shit, like nothing I would prescribe now, but it became like a really cool thing that we were doing. It was my way of being a good teammate. It was my way of taking control of something. And I really, really enjoyed it from that perspective. And again, the offhanded comment combined with what I had done for that 2 years, all of a sudden, boom, now I have this new thing, like the pro dreams faded away shortly in the summertime. And so it was, I want to go and do this. How do I do it? How do I be successful at it? And then I went all in on it, and the rest is kind of history. So it's a bit of a combination of things, but it was, it sort of kind of fell in love with the lifting of weights, and then kind of how the progression went from there.
That's really cool, DT. Conditioning to the core. Talk about the process. You touched on it earlier, but how about who you worked with and where our listeners can buy it from.
Thank you for the plug. I appreciate that. So this could be a 7-hour podcast, so I got to be careful because this. So
we might have to do a part 1 and 2.
Yeah, no doubt. But it's one of those things when if you're open to people and you're a people person, which I am, and most strength coaches I find tend to be, you end up meeting all kinds of people. One of the people I met along the way, it was the longtime strength and conditioning coach for the New York Knicks, who's been retired for multiple years now, but he was toward the end of his time with New York. Greg Brittenham, great guy. Father Dean Brittenham is one of the kind of godfathers of the profession going back in the day. And again, he'd been with the Knicks forever, Patrick Ewing era, right through the 2000 with Houston and into, the era we're talking about now. And so I had met him along the way, which is a long story, and we became pretty good friends. And he was getting towards the end of his time with the Knicks, which I didn't realize it was quite close to the end as it was. And we just started talking about the fact that he had written books in the past when he was sort of younger in the profession. One was about core training, one was about basketball, and I forget the third one. I think it's like plyometric progressions. And I just said to him, and I actually remember it, is that he was at the Summer League. So I'm in my office at Siena watching the Summer League on TV. We're having this conversation. He says, hold on a minute. He gets interviewed on the TV. So I'm watching my friend interviewed on the TV. He gets off the TV. I talk to him again. And I say, yeah, man, you should write another book. It would be a good way to kind of bookmark, so to speak, your career. And he goes, I'll only do it if you do it with me. And I'm like, oh, and as you guys know, I know Connor knows this. I'm a big bibliophile anyway. I'm a book guy. So don't tell me twice. But that's a big, undertaking. So I'm like, shit, I absolutely, I'd love to. Thinking it's just sort of his way of being nice about it. And so what ended up happening is Human Kinetics, which is the one of, if not the biggest, one of the biggest U.S. publishers in the fitness and performance side of things, had published his book on core training, which he wrote with his father, probably in the mid-90s. And they essentially wanted not really a second edition, but like a new version of this book. And at the time we were doing, and again, you guys probably don't remember that it was new at the time because you were just doing it, but we were doing this new styled core training that I had put together based off things that I had read and I had done. And so I said to him, look, I'll build a framework using the core training that we do at Siena. And you can just plug in any way you want, which he was fine with. And so, I think it took 3 years because being a co-author isn't the same as writing your own book because you got to go back and forth. And Human Kinetics is a phenomenal publishing house, but they do have a say, so to speak, in what you do and how it comes out. And so, 3 years later, I'm going to Wake Forest where Greg's career kind of had ended at that point. We're doing a photo shoot over kind of winter break. And then shortly after, I think the next summer it got published. And so again, it was meeting people, networking, me having enough knowledge. Some of that stuff was through the academic piece that we talked about. And I forget the year, it might be 2014. In the summertime, my book was published with Greg, and Conditioning to the Core. It's a core training book. Clearly, we're biased toward basketball, but it was written for pretty much anybody. And I hear about it on and off now, not as much as I did originally, but it was pretty well received. It's a bit textbooky looking back and a little bit heavy in terms of the writing, but it's got, tons and tons and tons of exercises and really nice kind of color pictures. And so I've heard from and talked to people who are doing sort of like post-back surgery rehab, right through to young upcoming athletes that have said, oh, I got that book for my son, or I was using that with my personal trainer. And it got a really good response, which again, as a book person, is a really nice thing to have kind of put out there. So if anyone would like to buy it, it's available at Amazon.com. Yeah, it was a cool experience, and I I'll do it again if I get the opportunity, as heavy going as it was.
So are you giving our listeners something? There might be some future book out there, or?
Well, I would love to. Yeah, right now, which is sort of on the heels of the PhD, I'm involved in a bit more research, which is a whole new era of my life, being this sort of pseudo research guy. Because I'm a book person, and I came up through that way as well, reading a lot. When I was first to Siena, trying to get my feet under me, is that any opportunity to do that, I would do in a heartbeat. But I will let you know. You'll get the first crack, fan, I promise.
Talk a little bit about, where you began, in strength conditioning to where you are now, and how you had to adapt to the times. I know I could be wrong, but I think it's more about, body weight, mobility now than it used to be. Guys don't want to lift as much as they once did. Talk a little bit about how you adapted since you began.
Yeah, I think it's funny because, as you guys know, because I sent you the before and after freshman year pictures, is I have everything. I kept everything since the day I walked in the door at Siena, and even some of the things I was doing when I was a personal trainer. So I literally have the history of my career at my fingertips if I need it. And what I've found is the adaptation, which is 100% accurate, is not necessarily reps and sets and what we're doing. It really is the adaptation to the athletes and the individuals, because this generation gets knocked a lot that we're working with now, because they are different. And you guys are sort of on the end of one generation. You guys are close to it, but I know you have an understanding of what I'm talking about, because they're considered more entitled and all this different stuff. But what I found is what worked my first year with Kenny Hasbrook works with this generation of ACC basketball players. And that's basically them understanding that you're there for them understanding that you care, them understanding that I know they are here to play basketball. They're not here to lift weights. And so it isn't that what we do in the room doesn't matter, because obviously it matters a great deal, but it doesn't matter more than the floor. And more importantly, it doesn't matter more than the individual. And so I think the adaptation has been, whether it's me working with a freshman water polo player at Siena in a sport I know not a lot about, or me working, like I was saying, with the best player in the MAC in Kenny Hasbrook, or the 20th pick in the draft a couple of years ago, Josh Okogie from our team a couple of years ago at Tech, it's just being able to adapt to the person. Because then once you've got that down, and you know this, Frank, because you and I were close, and you were a walk-on, Brawley and I were close, and he was one of the best players in the last couple of teams he played on, it's the adaptation to each other that I think is what the difference is. Because then what we actually do, then it's just a matter of, well, what do you need? You're playing a ton of minutes. We're reducing the volume. You're, a skinny freshman, got to get stronger. We're going to lift heavy. You're not going to play that much anyway. You are, Ryan Rossiter going into your senior year, tons of mileage, plays his balls off every play, wants to lift heavy because that's what's made him successful. Cool, but how are we going to manifest that in a way that's going to perpetuate a really good senior season and put you in a position to go forwards? So I couldn't agree more. But I found, again, if I look back at this 17 years of career, it's about me, and it's not necessarily you guys adapted to me. Mm-hmm. I think that's one thing that often happens as strength coaches. I'm always going to adapt to you guys, because then together we can grow, and it's going to look different for everybody. So the adaptation, I think, is 100% accurate, but really it's more to the individual, I think, than to the actual what we do. Because I know that side of it so well now, that you can give me a guy, we'll assess him, do some stuff. This is the plan. Let's talk about you and me and how we're going to get that together. That's where the magic happens.
That's why you're special, because I feel like not a lot of people are willing to adapt, especially at that high level. Yeah. Talk about in Atlanta, you have tons of resources. You have a bunch of, Atlanta being a big city, bunch of high level athletes coming through, especially at Georgia Tech, playing pickup there in the summertime. Talk about some of the athletes that you potentially worked with since being down there, guys who've come in, asked for advice, and how that's been for you.
It's and again, shout out LA, of course, because this, because it's one of maybe a handful of cities. I would assume Chicago's a little bit like this, but the weather doesn't always speak to it. New York, because it's New York. Definitely LA, because the runs in LA right now are crazy. If they can come from us. But Atlanta is one of those cities. I mean, we have our own pros, and we have, you know, our current pro, so to speak, is Josh Okogie. A couple of years ago, but the history of Georgia Tech speaks for itself, and we've got everybody from Amon Shumpert right down to, you know, Kenny Anderson and Steph Marbury and ones from before. And so it is a city that our pros come back, but pros come through a lot. And it's funny you asked that question, because we had a summer, I think it might be 3 summers ago now, and it was literally all-stars every single day in the gym. And Georgia Tech's funny because it's right in the middle of the city, but it's right next to 75, which is the quickest sort of road in and out of the city. So it's easy to get in and out of. Because it's Georgia Tech and not necessarily UCLA, in respect to huge, big brand name in sports. Not that it doesn't have one, but it just isn't quite the same as that. It's kind of a nice place to go and be anonymous, if that makes sense. So we had this one summer, I come in the gym, and Dwight Howard obviously is an Atlanta guy, so Dwight's there all the time. We have TNT studios across the road. So I come in one day, Chris Webber's playing Dwight one-on-one. What's going on? They're always really nice to me, which is great. Summer we had Kyrie Irving was shooting. I forget the name of the character he plays, where he's an old man.
Uncle Drew.
Yeah. So the movie that came out like maybe last year before they were shooting it, Kyrie's in the gym every morning, like literally like 6 a.m. John Wall came in pre the Achilles injury for the Lou Williams tournament. Lou Williams is a huge Atlanta guy and a Georgia guy. It was wild. It was literally wild. Mike Beasley, who's one of the most talented offensive players I've ever seen, he was there all the time. I mean, it was one particular summer. I mean, it's been that way since I've come down here, but it was just dudes every single day. It was just wild. And the cool thing about that is not so much them asking me, you know, my opinion on stuff, which happens occasionally depending on the guy, but really is watching them do stuff and seeing how they operate. What James Harden just was in the gym, like literally just randomly in the gym, couldn't even tell you why one day. And what they do, how they do it, what professionalism looks like for them. You know, guys that, you know, maybe could have had a different type of career. You could maybe see how they do things as opposed to others. And so that's been really, really interesting. And then the other part of the question too is being in the city where they all come to, there are different things that I have the ability to do and work with, which as much as I love Albany, it doesn't have the same level of sports science or pull for pro athletes. And so one of the bigger things that we've done probably in the last couple of years is work with Peak Performance Project, which is known as P3, which people won't necessarily know unless they follow sports science, but you'll know them because they post on Instagram and they have people come and assess. And they do force plate assessments and they do sports science assessments basically on all the pros. And the sort of flagship place is in Santa Barbara, which Raleigh, I went a couple of summers ago, and bro, you and I are retiring there. So, but that's where the flagship. That's where like all the main dudes go. And they had Luka before he became very well known. They had Giannis last summer. So they assess all these players. So the only other location in America is in Atlanta for the reasons that you basically said, Ryan. So it's down the road from us, like literally 6-8 minutes down the road. So we use them for assessment because of how I am. And again, you know this because we were doing hand grip tests and force. We were doing stuff that nobody in the MAC was doing when I was with you guys. And so I get to like up the ante and work with places like P3 where I go and I'm talking to these guys about, you know, sports science and the application of sports science with elite level basketball players, overlaying that with our guys. And then the thing that's been really nice is because I am in the field sort of in practice of using this stuff, and they are scientists, they like to ask me about stuff from a practical perspective. And so I got to take all these different things that were sort of like seeds and things that I planted at Siena, like the hand grip, which I got a picture of you doing it, which is what makes me think about it. And now I'm doing it at an elite level in the ACC, but because of my relationship with things in Atlanta, some of the technology that we utilize, I get to share ideas and concepts with these unbelievable companies. And that obviously on a personal level, it's been unbelievable. Talk about growth. But in terms of what I can do for the athletes, it kind of takes it up a whole different notch. And so that is something that I would have to say is unique to my environment here, which has been just a great ride.
So obviously with all that's going on with COVID, talk a little bit of how that's changed, in the weight room, on the court for you and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, that's been an interesting one. And I give an immense amount of credit to the guys. I probably can't even put it into words, which is unlike me, because so we're in a state that opened up fairly early, which is good and bad depending on how you look at it. So that did give us the opportunity to have some of the guys come back. So we came back, I think we're on week 12 of originally coming back. And by that, I mean literally just me in a weight room, no hoop, no nothing. So we were really stringent COVID restriction masks when they left. Obviously, the movements, they could drop the mask, but as soon as they did, mask back on again. Hand sanitize. I've never cleaned stuff. I don't even clean my house the way I weight room. So like really stringent stuff, and no basketball. Like you could, because we couldn't necessarily control the gym. We weren't really we weren't organized. We weren't prepared enough to kind of clean things and have bodies in the gym. And so it was, you can have local returning players back only with these restrictions, and it was just me and them, no coaches. And so the guys were just unbelievable. Some of it, I think, goes back to the relationship and the adaptation that we talked about before. But we're also fortunate we have an older team. And so they kind of get it, and that they're hungry, and they've been in this shutdown circumstance for 3 months, 4 months. And so it's like, we're going to let you do some stuff, but not all of it. And they've just been unbelievable, like unbelievable. Like, the masks and going through the stuff with me, and, coming out of this 3-4 month period of time of doing not a lot, which from a physical perspective for me is not a bad thing, because as again, you guys can attest, we almost play basketball too much. As much as I love it, like there's just no off time, particularly with the new NCAA rules. And so we had this immediate, like you could do nothing for 3 months. So a lot of like bumps and bruises and sorenesses, you recover from them. I mean, Riley, your knees would have felt incredible. I mean, you would have been flying, bro. But anyway, but what came from it rather, is that you can't go from this sort of 0 mile per hour environment back into what you would do normally. And so it was a slow progression to build them up to where they are now, which is, almost full go on the floor in small groups, lifting heavy weights, doing all the things that you guys know and have done with me in the past. But they really were really great at just, this is the rules, this is what we're going to stick by. Great. This is week 3. We're going to add more stuff. And now we can add basketball in, but you can't play. But, and they've just been unbelievable at it. But again, I think it's gone back to age of the guys, great communication from our staff to the guys about expectations. And, the guys being competitive enough to to challenge themselves in different ways. Like, we're going to be better because of this. Like, DT is going to put these stuff together. There's a lot of, I don't know if you remember Naked Wednesdays, which was sort of like shirts off lift in the summertime, coined by one Ryan Rossiter. So we have a ton of that stuff, which I'm a huge proponent of, because if you're cool with that, that's fine. But it was just sort of like, we're going to get in this. Like, we're going to get in the vibe. And for a strength coach, that's really cool, because if all you've got, if your hook is the weight room, because you can't play and you can't, do skills work and all that other stuff, if the only thing you got is the weight room as basketball players, and they attack it the way they did, it was unbelievable. I was telling a friend of mine who works in the NBA that it's almost like basketball utopia, because up to this point, none of the guys have sore knees, sore backs, bad ankles, because they haven't played. Yeah. They're all doing everything I want them to do because they're hungry to get back. We've got this older team, so their capacity to do things is bigger. And this definitely the 9 of the 11 weeks was just, I mean, I was just rolling. I was just, they're basically doing it for me. I'm just playing music, I'm pointing to stuff. So it's been challenging from that point of view. I think them just sort of focusing on what's in front of them helped them. And that includes the uncertainty of the season, how it's going to start, what are we going to do? And they're unbelievable. So tons and tons of credit to them for that.
Did you have them on a program for those 3 months, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of those things when, I kind of gave them like a buffet is the best way to describe it. So, because not everybody is going to have the same ability to have stuff. So someone might have bands and a kettlebell. I have nothing, whatever it might be. I have a gym in my basement. So basically what I would do is once, twice a week, I would do this. I would FaceTime them and we would chat about stuff, which, as you can imagine, didn't always better than do with strength and conditioning. But then it would also be, this is a yoga workout I want you guys to think about doing. Here's some hill sprint type of stuff. Here's some sort of generic body weight workouts. And then every 3 or 4 weeks, unless they specifically texted me and asked for it, I would send them here's a Connor Fenlon specific body weight plus whatever you had available workout. One guy who was an incoming freshman had a weight room that was open in his complex, and he just filmed his weight room. Okay, here's your workout, some stuff to think about. And so it wasn't formal like ABC. Then you get to me in a few months, DEF, and so on. It was here's a bunch of different things, because like I was saying, that they really weren't been able to do a lot. So anything that they could do was a bonus, because then once you come to me, I can do anything. Yeah. So it was just kind of keep them going. And then I think the most important thing, which isn't talked about a lot, is really the mental health part of it. Because I do think physically it was very good for basketball players to have this downtime because of the physical toll that the season and the years take on you. But you've just suddenly had the sport you love taken away from you, your tournaments removed from you, this massive public health crisis that no one really still don't understand now. And so I think some of it was, let's just talk, man. Like, what's going on? How are you doing? What's going on? We got some kids from New York. Obviously, the city was really bad. Everyone, the family's good. Yeah, we're fine. Okay, here's some stuff I want you to think about. Or if I text you, you don't text me back, I'm not going to get offended, because I don't want to hear from me either. You know what I'm saying? So, so it was a mixture of different things. And again, we got this older team, and they're hungry for it. And I have a really good relationship with all of them. So we got through it pretty well. And like I said, looking back now 12 weeks into, the quote unquote comeback. I mean, most of them are unbelievable where they're at physically now.
That's good to see that, the hunger and the drive didn't stop. I feel like now more than ever, Zoom has come such a big part of our lives, especially now we're actually using it. But did you guys as a team, as a program, use Zoom at all with individual meetings, or maybe Zoom workouts as a group, or team meetings? Like, how did Zoom play a role with you guys?
There was an NCAA rule. I don't know if it was just our interpretation, but they weren't really big on me doing, so I could give you a workout, but I couldn't coach you through which is it's sort of a weird, well, that doesn't make any sense because you've given it anyway, but it was a rule. So we're gonna play with that. But we had to be honest, it was a lot more FaceTime and small group FaceTime than it was like full team Zooms. I know some teams are Zooming every day at 8 a.m., but coach is very much sort of a player's coach, and kind of similar to Coach Mack in respect to intuitive, where they don't want to hear from us right now. Not in this way. I'll call them, you call them. DT, make sure you stick up with the guys, and we'll keep those relationships going. The biggest one, was with the George Floyd situation and Black Lives Matter and the civil liberties and all that kind of stuff. And that's when being apart is not a good thing. And obviously you guys know this, and I don't want to change the tone of the podcast too much, but that was when we shifted gears and had Zoom meetings, and we had a lot of conversations about what are we going to do? What do you guys need? And conversations. And as you guys know, because you know me and you know how we operate, is that was some of the most compelling conversations I've ever had. And so that's when the sort of magnitude of Zoom became even more important for our group. But before that, it was a lot of this kind of stuff. There was 3 of us on a FaceTime, just sort of BSing, or what questions have you got? Or, and even they would call me and ask me how we were doing, which was, just goes to show the character of guys that we have. And everyone's good with you. How's the kids are doing all right. So that was really cool. So it was an interesting time from that point of view.
Wow, yeah, Zoom has definitely changed the world. I wish I had a little stock in it before it blew up, because I could be this smart.
God.
It is what it is. But change a little bit of a topic, but go back to Siena. People that don't know, you trained every sport at Siena. You weren't just basketball. Talk a little bit about how it was hard. It was hard. Was it easy to manage? Doing different. You talked about 5 a.m. You might have swim and dive, and then you might have cross. And how was it to turn it on and off? With each team.
Yeah.
what they needed to work on, what the other teams needed to work on, kind of thing?
It's I mean, I'll be honest, it's extremely hard. It's extremely hard because it's a long day, which is part of it. I mean, it is a little bit of what you sign up for when you come into sports in general, support staff roles in general, mid-major roles in general. Because like I was saying before, you know, a lot of days were 6 a.m. start, 8 p.m. finish. You know, Saturdays was usually I wouldn't do anything unless someone really requested it, and then Sundays we would do some stuff, and obviously we had games. And it was really, really hard. But I because I'm sort of an organized-minded person, which surprises people at times, is it basically made me develop a lot of systems. And so the kind of systematic workout that men's basketball would do would flow the same way systematically that baseball would, which would flow the same way that, you know, water polo or swimming or field hockey would. What ended up being put in the workout was dependent on the sport, individual needs, and so on. And to be quite honest, my ability to do it. And so that made it easier, because then if I had to leave a workout and go and deal with something else or practice or whatever, the system was so strong that if you were a basketball player walking into the baseball lift, you would know this is the core section. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not what we're doing, but this is the core section. And I know they're going to go to DT strength section. And so it became very systematic like that. And that way I was able to give the ownership of the programs to you guys. So if, you know, I couldn't be there, which was very rare, you would just, okay, well, this is the warm up followed by this, followed by that. We got the strength section today, and then we, you know, whatever. And so that's basically how I did it, was a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and probably being a little naive as well, with just about how hard it all was. But there was a couple of things I think that are important to note. I think, like I said, very, very hard, and that's just being honest about it. The reward from it, though, other than being able to be a part of young people's lives, which is really why I do what I do, and seeing you guys grow and prosper, you know, as you are right now as adults, but as young adults within the 4 years I have you guys, was to sit courtside and watch you guys and the girls do what you do and do what you did. Because, you know, and I, you know, did it lacrosse, win a water polo match, there's the whole thing. So it's not anything about that. But because I'm a basketball person, that was my reward. You know, that was what the end of a hard day, I can go and watch, you know, you guys play and feel that in a way that I'm part of something bigger. And that's true of all the sports in Siena, but definitely with basketball. And then the other thing that I always realized, and I think looking back on it, I don't know maybe why it clicked so much with me. And again, I know what I'm about to say, you guys will agree with. Siena is a kind of place where what you put into it, you're going to get out of it. So obviously that's kind of college structures in general, but mid-major, restrictions because of that, very hard work environment. But if you work really, really hard, if you're diligent, if you care, you can win and become the head coach at Iowa. You know, you can become the player development, you know, at Georgia Tech. You can, you know, go on and do the things that you guys have done. You can go play for the Miami Heat. You can, you know, work in these big businesses that some of the lacrosse guys and girls have gone into, and medical fields that some of the baseball players have gone into. And I kind of always inherently knew that about the place. And I think if you look, because, you know, obviously, Fan, you're around more than I am, is that there's not a lot of people who, and this is I'm talking administration right down, who were at Siena when you were at Siena. And I would probably say for Ryan too. And that isn't a knock on Siena. It's just that literally they put work in. Laurie Ankel's the athletic director at St. Rose. I mean, that lady worked her ass off, you know, from start to finish, and now she's an athletic director. I'm doing the things that I'm doing, and so on and so forth. So my reward was young people, and it was the ability to watch you guys do what you did. And secondly, I just knew if I poured all of myself into it and you guys, I would get something out of the end. And I'm living it as I sit here and talk to you guys.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really a testament to what you did when after players leave Siena, they still contact you and ask you for exercises and drills and weightlifting programs. Talk about that's been how, you know, guys who've left and still reaching out to you and using you as a resource and as a guide.
Yeah, it's really humbling. It's like that's one of those things. And I remember Hammer always used to talk about this because he obviously was an OG and been around for a long time and had seen waves of guys come through and girls and everybody else he's dealt with. But it was that whole thing about how, you know, the relationships, and actually it's not even the relationship, it's the trust that has been built over that 2, 3, 4 year span bleeds into 8, 9 years as a pro. I now have a problem, which I've never had before. Maybe I'm going to, you know, call Hammer and then I'm going to call DT. And it's a really humbling thing. And I think Ryan had said that, you know, I'll send like a 2-page answer, which is partly because of who I am, but it's also because if you have that much trust in me, that you have, I want to get in better shape, I'm coming out of COVID, I got a knee problem, whatever it might be, then you're going to get what you got when you were 18. Because that level of trust, just because I'm here, you're there, or wherever, that hasn't diminished. I mean, it's a family for life thing, you know, and the experiences that we had together, which built that trust, you know, you can't put a price on all that. So it's very, very humbling, and I take it really seriously. And it's fun too, because like I said, now I get to witness what, you know, Hammer and those guys talked about, because people are getting married and having kids, and they're in the latter years of their professional career, and, you know, they're becoming, you know, coaches at the former prep schools, and it's a really interesting thing. So yeah, they're always going to get 2-page answers. So if any of you listening, and I fully expect to get an essay, but like I said, it goes back to that trust, because I know you were a little bit older, Raleigh, coming in as a prep school kid, but I've known you guys since you were 17, 18 years old. You know, I mean, that's the truth, is I've known you since you were a late teenager, and what we went through is special, win or lose. And, you know, and so if you come back to me again, even if it's a decade in between, you're still 17, 18. Like that dynamic is still really important to me. And I'm going to learn from you guys too, because some of the guys, you know, who play pro now and have been around, or, you know, doing stuff in business, you know, I listen to stuff they put out or that they say, and I'm like, shit, you know, that's really good stuff. And I'll put it in what I do, or I'll try and think about it in relation to my job. And I think that trust goes both ways there.
Yeah, I have, so, you know, we put that TBT team about 2 years ago together, maybe 3 years ago now together. And, you know, obviously both of us knowing Kenny Hasbrook pretty well as we did, he was one of those guys, we just kick your ass. It didn't matter what time of the day, you know, he would just come out. And I went to rebound for him once. And, you know, I used to know Kenny to come in the door, put his shoes on and go shoot. He said, no, I got to do the DT dynamic stretch. You know, I'm getting older now. And he's like, I don't just hop on the court anymore. He's like, you know, I do what DT tells me. And I'm not just saying this because you're on here, but he told me you're the best strength coach he's ever had. So, you know, I see that coming from a guy like Kenny. But just to show you, like, he still does all the same stuff you taught him. You know, that was what, God, 10, 12 years ago by now that he. So it's just the credit to you, and the credit to, you know, the trust these guys have for you. But this is a question I kind of have an answer I think you're going to say, but you could go. What's the most dramatic 4-year growth you've seen from an athlete at Siena? It could be basketball, it could be any sport. I think I know who you're going to say. I'll let you go.
It's Ryan, and Cody, and that's, I mean, there was, don't get me wrong, I mean, there was some baseball players that like ended up getting drafted, and you know, you know, other sports, you know, the lacrosse players that suddenly, you know, were borderline All-Americans, but the thing that, and Ryan explained it better than, and so I won't, but it's one of those things when. And Coach Mack knew, and to be fair, Coach B, who I think was part of the recruiting process originally, they knew, is that he had everything. It's not that he was missing anything. Like, he's a talented kid, very skillful. But I think because the perception of Ryan when he came in was he's kind of this goofy, like, you know, lanky kid that people never really understood that it wasn't going to take much. You know, so and those kind of cases are really fun for me, because if you have a kid that already has all that stuff, and they're really, and don't get me wrong, skill development is important. I don't mean to diminish that, but if all they really need is my stuff, and then you get a kid like Ryan who's going to tear the walls down to get to that point, it's unbelievable. And I mean, so it was already within him. I think the piece which he talked about a little bit when he told me that he wasn't going to take the day off and we had to sneak in behind Coach Chaskin, which is unbelievably honest for a podcast, but very true, is the truth behind it. Because and you guys have both played with, been around, coached guys that have the goods, probably need strength and conditioning, or maybe it's just conditioning, or maybe something, and they just can't do it. Ryan, it just wasn't, he was never going to stop. And you know him better than I do at this point, Fan, is he still doesn't. Like the fact he's investigating nutrition and sort of, other things he gets into, it's inspiring. It really is, because it was a misconception of who he was, which Coach McCaffrey never bought into. And then literally it was a relentless pursuit of being who he knew he could be. And if you tie all that together with an opportunity that he had, I mean, shit, like it would be, and even now I'm trying to think, 'cause I'm going to year 5 here, and we've got some guys that have really blossomed or poured into what I've doing, but it probably, as of right now, and I think I'm going into my 17th year, including in the fitness industry, and I don't think anybody's in that sort of rare territory.
No, that's, yeah. And just to clarify for the listeners, Ryan Rossiter, not Oliver, even though DTO thinks highly of me, but
yeah.
No, that's definitely awesome. And I mean, he was a beast and a monster out there, so
yeah.
I definitely understand that. What would you say is one thing you miss about being at Siena and being part of the athletic program there?
I think that the thing that I immediately knew that wasn't going to be there, and I seek it out because it's how I am, is when you work I guess it isn't just mid-major, but when you work in a place like Siena, everything is just literally right there. So I can leave my office, Hammer's training room still is just down the hallway. If you want to see any administrator, they're down that hallway. You guys, whether you want to see me or not, live in the buildings over there. I got the pool right here, the weight room, everything is just the turf field if you want to go run in the summertime. And so there's an intimacy about your daily working life, which is really enriching, particularly as a young person kind of coming up in the business. And I think that dynamic was, particularly the years that we've talked about, CBI championship, all that stuff, is what makes that special. At Georgia Tech, you have it in enclaves, but because it's a city campus, I work in our basketball arena here. Our athletic offices are just down the road here. This is something else. This is over here. And so it's all spread apart. And one thing, which I actually learned from Brian Bury, who was the head coach at St. Rose. I remember working camp with him in the summertime, as he said, every day in practice, he would say a person's name one time. So everybody in the team would be acknowledged one time. And it wouldn't always be a bad thing, but it would just be every single time, as a player, you'd have been acknowledged by the head coach. And that sort of level of communication, and this is me back in college working summer camp, like dumb kid trying to make money. And that really stuck with me. And Coach Bury's a genius in that respect. So every single day, I would go see Ham, go see Brian in the training room, come down, athletic offices, poke my head in women's staff, go through, talk to Coach Mack, Coach Chasky, whoever it might be, down the hallway, upstairs. Hey, John, how you doing? And I would do it every single day because it's the ties that bind, right? And it eliminates gray areas. If you've got a question or an issue or a problem, you can immediately solve it. People would want to talk to me because clearly I was working with their athletes. It would say to the point of well, I never see Danny's in the back, he's only in the weight room. So at Tech, you don't have that. So I sort of home grew it where obviously COVID stopped that for now, but I'll drive, park near the parking lot, walk through the athletic training room, go upstairs, wave at the cafeteria workers, talk really bad Spanish to the lady who does the cleaning and downstairs, and go through the basketball offices. And so I go see compliance. And that's the lesson I learned from Coach Bury as a 19-year-old. But I honed it at Siena. And I think that is the biggest difference, is the intimacy that you can work in the environment to create really good stuff. Just you have to go seek it out at the level and environment I'm in now.
That actually is a good point, because there's a lot of guys who don't go notice in practice. So they, and nowadays kids always want to be built up. So it's hard, and it's really easy to put a kid down. So if you could do something as simple as just, showing that you care is important. And that's one thing you've done. This is kind of a 2-part question. So, knowing I sat on the bench with you a lot, we became really good friends, and you're the king of keeping everyone back on the bench. What happened, dunks, fights, you were the first line of defense.
Yeah.
you know, and also your style was unbelievable. You always had style, something special. So where do you think your passion, you know, your passion and style came from?
I think the passionate part of it is I fell in love with basketball when I was living in the north of England, and I was a lanky, didn't really know what I was going to do with myself. I think I was 10 or I was 13. And I didn't even really know who Michael Jordan was, and I'm watching this stuff, and I just same probably way you guys fell in love with it, but I didn't have it as present. Obviously, you grew up with an exceptional coach as a dad, and that's a slightly different dynamic. And I just absolutely fell in love with it, and you know, it has defined my life. It's given me everything, including a wife, a career, friendships. You know, that I you know more than include you both. And so it's that's kind of a bit hard to quantify, but I'm still the 12-and-a-half-year-old boy. You know, I remember when the lights went down at Siena and they did the sort of pro level call outs. You know, I'm on year like 6. We've won 3 chips. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm getting goosebumps. You know, I'm fortunate enough now to be at the level I'm at now. And I get to see Coach K, which is not always a good thing, multiple times a year. You know, we played in the Dean Dome multiple times, beat them, you know, really well in a great game this year. You know, and I'm still 12 years old. And I know you guys probably know that because as you're getting older, you probably feel that. And so that, I think, is where the passion comes from, is I'm a little bit more reserved, I think, because there's so many years in than I was up and through, you know, your years at Siena, because I've just seen a lot now, so I don't get surprised. I mean, you do double onions one time, and your life's never the same again. The dressing stuff, it's funny. It comes from my dad, who I don't think you would describe as like, oh, he's a dandy and he's got to wear flamboyant stuff, because I'm obviously an extrovert character, which is where the colors come from. But my dad always dressed up. And it was always a big thing to dress up and present yourself a certain way. And so I think that's where some of the initiative comes from. The other thing, which, and I know you guys know this because it's sort of who I am as a strength coach anyway, is I just, it's the only chance I get to not be in khakis and a polo shirt. And I want to always present myself the best I can for my profession, because you're never going to forget me. I'm aware of that. I'm loud. I talk a lot. I got tattoos. I'm British. I wear colorful clothing. But you're going to see me, and that's the representation of the strength coach that I want you to have. Not 6 a.m. can barely keep my eyes open, slightly unironed clothing. So that was important to me too. Is the presentation of me as a person, my personality, and then sort of professionally. I didn't want to be lumped in with how other strength coaches choose to draft, which is completely up to them. But I just, yeah, it's just kind of always gone that route. And then credit to my wife, because I'm clearly, again, flamboyant and extroverted, which you really look like a clown. So she has impeccable taste, and therefore has a way of tailoring it down where I can hopefully pull it off more often than not. Without her, it would be costume city, I think, if I didn't have her to help me out with it.
Man, that was one thing for sure. DT all was clean on the sidelines, the bow tie, the socks. I remember when I was hurt my freshman year.
No,
DT going at it, man. I thought I was in the conversation. I was trying to be competitive with him, but he loaned me a bow tie one game. I got all these Twitter compliments, and I was like, I got to take credit, but it's all DT.
Bro, you had the bow tie, you had the non-prescription glasses. Riley, we were killing it on the sideline.
Man, I have some photos, DT, in my phone, or it's us two, like, posing at the camera.
I think we got smacked in the game, too, but we were killing it. That's all I remember.
Hey, we played hard. We didn't miss a shot. Didn't turn the ball
off. Yeah, we feel that game.
Facts. So I would say during your time at Siena, you were probably the most sought-out guy pre-game in terms of, like, DT, can you stretch me? Can I do this? This hurts, whatever the case may be. Rumor has it there's a time where you may be running around and you had to get some type of medical attention.
Yeah.
About?
Yeah. So I don't know if it was your junior or senior year, Ryan. I can't remember which one it was. And it's actually funny because this goes back to the clothing. So I got myself this nice ass pair of blue shoes. So I'm rocking these blue shoes. So I got the blue shoes. My wife's picked out this outfit so I don't look insane, and I'm feeling myself. So blue shoes, you're very dressy blue shoes, and so they're very, very smooth on the bottom. Like the sole is just smooth. There's no grip. So I'm getting ready to go to the game. My kids are in front of me, and I slip on there's steps on the inside of my house, but they're just wooden steps kind of going into the outhouse to the out. Take my kids out. They go flying. And I slip and I land on my elbow, like super hard impact on my elbow. So, and I'm lying there for a second. My kids are okay because I surprisingly no one was hurt from their point of view, because I could have hurt them pretty bad. So I'm like kind of playing it off, but I know I've hurt myself pretty bad. But it's game day, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like it's game. So I know I hurt myself. So the kids go in, whatever. I look at my elbow, and not to be graphic, but it split my elbow right to the bone. So you could see it was just like I can't remember, it was like a gash that was open to the bone. So I'm like, all right, this is bad. But it's game day. So I go in, I'm trying to downplay it to my kids, I'm fine. And I tell my wife, this is pretty bad. And she said, go to the game because there's doctors at the game. Like there's Hammer, and then there's literally doctors and paramedics at the game. So you're going to an environment where there's medical people. So I'm like, all right, cool. So we go to the game. So I'm not, again, I don't want to be too graphic in this thing, but it's not one of those like heavy bleeders because it's so deep, but it's bleeding. So I'm driving the game. I get to the game, but we got to warm up, Ryan. We got to get ready for the game. We got my man JP in the back. He's fired up. We got a game to play. So I'm going through the warm ups. My wife's telling Hammer, she's like, you got to grab Dan because he's bleeding out his elbow. So Greg's trying to get my attention. I'm stretching guys, doing my stuff. So finally, I go in and I show Greg, and he's like, he's kind of laughing at me because it's a dumb injury to have, but he recognizes it's pretty bad. He gets Dr. Alfred. They look at it. So Hammer, to his never-ending credit, takes my dress shirt and he puts on it the stuff that you guys would use for when it's blood in the game because it breaks down blood. So he's basically dry cleaning my shirt. The anthem's getting played. So I'm lying up face down, Dr. Alfred, and I've got a tattoo on my arm. So he's stitching my elbow across. There's like a wave that goes across my elbow, like Picasso, like going across my elbow, along the wave. So the tattoo's not all crazy. And so so you guys are loose, warmed up. The anthem's being played. I'm face down. I'm getting stitched up. Hannah gives me back my dry clean shirt. I get ready to go. I come out. I'm sitting on the bench, and then when we play the game. And it's funny because at the times you don't think about this stuff because you're just like, man, it's game day, whatever. Yeah. But like all these years later, I'm like, holy crap! Because by the second half, all my adrenaline worn off, and I felt crap because it just hit me how bad it was. And but yeah, I mean, yeah, we won that game too, which is good. But yeah, that was probably the most unique thing that ever happened to me individually at Siena. But what are you gonna do? Show must go on.
Absolutely. You want to get to quick hitters now?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Perfect. First question, favorite weight room music?
Trap music. Trap. Caffeine and trap. People here know it. I'm in the city where let's go.
That's true. There's a lot of good artists down there. You might not even have to play anything. You just put a mic out there.
We had Playboy Cardi at practice last year. He come down a little bit. Yeah. Let's go trap.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Say you're back in the Capital Region. What's your favorite place to visit or your favorite food place to visit in the Capital Region?
That's a really question. I'm going to go to Fazio's too. Shout out to Fazio. Just because that's my guy. That's my guy. Let's go there.
That's it. Hey, that's good.
Can't go wrong.
What are you going to do?
We're just trying. I live near the farmer's market. I went down yesterday looking for him so we can get a sponsorship for this, but he wasn't there. So we're another week.
If we keep shouting him out enough,
he's gonna.
My guy has fun, and he knows that. He's sitting here. He knows it's coming.
I'm gonna send him. This week I'm gonna tweet at him again. I already did it once. No,
Yeah.
to no comment, but it's okay.
Defense, do the right thing, bro. It makes sense.
But what's one? I know you've obviously done a lot of sports, but what's one sport you've never got to train that you wish you could?
Paralympics, just in general. There's a documentary on Netflix that discusses the Paralympics history and also certain Paralympic athletes, which clearly is what sparked this answer. But there's a level of awe that you have to stand in when you watch these individuals compete at the highest level the way that they do. And I've always felt that. And I think that working with an elite Paralympian would be a very special thing to do. So I'm going to use that as my example.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Name a Siena player that came in as a freshman that you obviously met on an official visit in summer school, but like, who's someone that kind of blew your mind away from day one in terms of strength and commitment to the weight room?
Well, Ryan's an easy one, but I didn't meet him on his freshman visit. It might be, and there's a handful, because you guys were all really good. I mean, every individual sort of like taste for it might be a little bit different, but I'm gonna probably say, kind of gut answer, not including Ryan, would be Bisping, would be Brett, because obviously he had a lot of good raw materials in terms of his structure, work ethic, and obviously you play with him, so you know those things, Ryan. But I think it wasn't the same sort of jump because he had the physicality and the body frame, which Ryan arguably didn't have when he came in. But what we did with his physicality and his frame, I think, was really, really cool. And so I think that's what made that bit special.
Yeah.
Who do you say the best player is during your time at Siena?
I actually knew you were going to ask me this question, and I'm going to say Kenny Hasbrook. There's a caveat because the answer is Edwin Ublis, but I'm going to come to him in a second. Okay. Kenny Hasbrook is a killer, and I mean in the nicest possible way, because I've been around NBA players. I've been around Power 5 now for 5 years, watching teams play and obviously having players and some excellent Siena teams too. And there's not a lot of killers. And he is a killer, and that's a special guy to be around. And there's some stories about him and his mentality that I'm just fortunate to have been around. But so he's my easy answer. The hard is Edwin Ublis, because if he had Kenny's mentality, he wouldn't have come to Siena. But pound for pound, he might be the best basketball player I've ever worked with. And that goes into, if you think about it, take stats and what happened on the floor aside for a second, but just from what I do, size, length, scoring ability, defensive ability, probably to a fault, a sort of unflappable demeanor. He's a pro. I mean, if he just, with as much as I love Matt, if you're listening, I don't mean this in a bad way, but if he had that click in his head, it would. I think a lot of things he wouldn't have come to Siena, but he might be the best pound for pound basketball player that I've ever worked with.
Oh. Yeah, nah, he's nice, man. He's nice. He came back and played with us in practice, and it's just like,
yeah. He's just, yeah. I mean,
if he get mad, we can't guard him. Like,
if he wanted to go, you couldn't do anything. And then what made it worse is that when engaged, you couldn't do anything. So you couldn't stop him, and he would stop you. And again, I mean, he's 6'7", long as hell, athletic, bouncy, can shoot it, handle, sleepy crossover, can pass. I mean, people, Fenn knows this, but people don't always talk about the shot, the move that opened up Ronald's shots. Second shot was a penetration from Eddie from the wing kick to Ron. He just, I mean, I've been thinking about it a lot because I figured you'd ask me that question. And this, I work with guys that will kick your ass, as opposed to Kenny, who's a killer. A lot of guys that would kick your ass. But pound for pound, in terms of absolute ability, I think it might have to be Ed.
Nah, that's definitely what's up. To piggyback on that, what's the best single game performance you've ever seen?
Oh, that'd be Kenny. I would say I'm going to split it. Siena-wise, I'm going to say Kenny against Vandy in the first tournament, because I knew he was good. We all knew he was good. But that was unbelievable. Like, I think one of the problems with time and, high definition now and just how people consume stuff is that people won't really get a chance to see that game. But he was unbelievable. I'll just leave it there. The other one that I'll use, the tech one, is our first 2 years. Our big guy was Ben Lammers, big quiet white guy from Texas, and we played a game in China, which is a long after party podcast story. And he was terrible all week. Time changes and so on. Practice was bad. And we played UCLA and lost, unfortunately, kind of at the buzzer. And it was Ryan had been the best big guy performance that I've ever seen, particularly his senior year. But a game he played against Clemson our first year, but that game against UCLA, he was – I've never seen a big guy play like that. And Ryan would come close second. But it would be Kenny against Vandy. I mean, I can't even think of something that might even come close to that in terms of like otherworldly performance.
What would you say the best your favorite arena you've ever been to?
Oh, that's a good one. FedEx Forum, and we got smoked, is a cool arena. That's a cool ass. It's a pro arena, so it's a bit unfair, but that is a really cool arena. Madison Square Garden just feels different. We went to the NIT finals there. That just feels different. I think one or both of you guys might have played there at some point, but it just you can't. That's a weird one because you can't describe it. But I love playing against North Carolina, UNC Dean Dome.
Yeah,
ours is beautiful at Tech. Virginia's is unbelievable. Clemson's is really nice. And it's not even just the Jordan brand thing, because I know you can get pulled into that, but I really like playing there. So I think college wise, it might end up being the Dean Dome if I'm really, really being honest with myself. Yeah. And then pro wise, yeah, I mean Brooklyn's arena is crazy too. So it'd be a toss between FedEx or the Brooklyn Nets arena.
Nah, absolutely. Back to your playing days, DT. Whether we know the person or not, who's the best basketball player that you played against?
Best one I ever played against. That's a good question. I tell you, and this ends up being a sad story, and I don't want to keep bringing certain points of this down, but a teammate of mine at Franklin Pierce, his name was Kevin Scott, Canadian guy, life of the party, unbelievable dude. On my visit, coming out of the JUCO, he dyed his hair peroxide blonde, big, athletic black guy, unbelievable character. And he should have been a Division I player. I think randomly, he ended up being recruited by Siena at some point. For some reason, I remember that. I don't know why. And he was just unbelievable, sort of Division II stretch for big hands, super athletic guy. And he might be the best guy. And that was really more in practice because I went up against him and he kicked the crap out of me. And he ended up dying of cancer young, unfortunately. But I'm going to give it to him because that's my guy right there. And he was really impressive. Other guys, I mean, I played pickup against Prosper, and that dude's unbelievable. In the summer times, I mean, people forget how good he was. But I'm going to give it to Kevin Scott because shout out to Kevin, that's my dude.
Sure.
What's the most points you've scored in a game?
38.
Yeah.
Damn.
The zone, bro. I was in a zone.
Say we're in Atlanta. You're taking us out to eat. Where are we going to eat? What restaurant? What spot are we going to hit?
Man, Atlanta's unbelievable.
Don't say Magic City and
yeah. Well, I mean, that was
lemon pepper. I got to go wings.
The wings wild down there. The thing that's really great about Atlanta is much like LA and New York City, like I was saying, you can get any food you want from, great seafood, although I know Tampa speaks for itself, but great seafood, soul food's unbelievable down here. Asian food is great down here. So it kind of really depends on what it is that you want to get. But I'm trying to think of the name of the place. A guy that was on our team my first year, it's a Cajun seafood restaurant. It's like a Creole name. I was trying to remember it, but it was. I took my wife there, and it was expensive, but it was really, really good. So if I can remember playing this podcast, I'll tell you. But it was Papa Dough. Papa Dough. It's a franchise.
Papa Dough.
Yeah, let's go, man. It was really, really good, like seafood, kind of like Southern Louisiana flavor. It was cool.
Add that to the list for sure.
You have any pre-game rituals or superstitions before a game, or anything you have to do? Put one sock on the other, or?
Yeah, I think it's funny for staff members because it ends up being sort of about you guys. It's like me remembering your rituals, which sounds very like servant leader stuff I'm supposed to say, but it really is. Like, Ryan is going to come out at this time. I'm going to have this period of time. I know he's going to want me to do some stuff with his leg because of his knee. But I think, all this is the way the coaches wanted it to be. Like this coach might want to come out on the floor beforehand. And so I think the rituals are more yours. But what I found is at Tech more than Siena, because I would normally either be leaving Siena in a mad rush to get to the arena, or I would be leaving home. So it was just me more driving. My first couple of years was a lot of the staff would stay. So we would do our shoot around 4 hours before the game, eat, and then the staff would stay, and about 2 or 3 hours before we'd start getting changed, and we would have banter, just basically just BSing, talking. And I think that particularly in a rebuild, which we're still, hoping toward more of the end of now, it just was a nice way to blow off steam. And I think the rituals are more me supporting your rituals, but I think ways to just sort of clear the mind and just sort of talking crap with a bunch of your friends on staff was a really good way to do that. So that hasn't happened as much recently because our dynamic is a little bit different. But yeah, that was the one.
Nah, for sure. What is someone new? What's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's starting off in the industry of strength and conditioning?
Patience is probably a part of it, because there's a lot of rush to want to do everything. And this is true if you're a freshman basketball player. Like, you want to come in and play 40 minutes, and you want to party, and you want to do everything. And so I think as a young quote unquote freshman, strength and conditioning professional, I think that's part of it, is you got to be patient. But I genuinely think, and I know because you've said this too, which I really appreciate, what separates me from other people is it's always going to be about the athletes. Always. The moment you make it about you, you've lost it. You've lost the point of it, because you won't be able to get through the, early career 17-hour days, and you won't be able to get through, difficult circumstances or problems with coaches, or if you get fired, or if you're not going to be able to get all through that, because it stopped being about me athletically the day I stopped playing, and so I think it's not about you. Like, I think if you remember that and you put your energies in the right place, then the rest will just take care of itself. And I'm a lifelong believer in that it's not about you.
Where would you say the best place the game of basketball has brought you? Country-wise, or maybe even in the U.S. Maybe even in the U.S.
Yeah, that's good. I think my heart says New York, because my whole U.S. existence stems from arriving in Newark, New Jersey, and then living in Schenectady, New York, to everything that you guys know about and we've talked about. So I'm an adopted son of New York State, and proudly so. But I think China amazes me and intrigues me, and that might be one of those. I don't want to say once in a life experiences, because I'd like to go back, but just because of diplomatic relations, distance, expense, and things of that nature, it's definitely not a quick one, but it's just an absolutely incredible place. And then to play a game there with the support that China has for basketball in Shanghai, which is a very westernized city, and then at Georgia Tech, which has a very, very big Chinese and Asian contingent of students, and actually has like a school of something in the Shanghai area. So it was almost a home game for us. It was, and then again, super fortunately, because of playing at the level, working at the level that we play at, we don't go to China like I would have done with Schenectady. I mean, we stayed in the high on the Bund, I mean, we were like big pimping. I mean, it was wild. It was a wild, wild experience. And so I'm gonna say, emotionally New York, intellectually China.
Absolutely. So we're episode 5. We've had a tremendous guest on. We've had Ronald Moore, Rossiter, Tim Reynolds, and AJ Canal. What would you say, or name someone affiliated with Siena basketball that you love to see as a guest on the podcast?
I got 2, and I'm going to pick 2 because I'm the guest. One is player, because I figured that's, with my position, that would make the most sense. Staff-wise, you got to get Hammer. You have to get
Ham Boogie.
The only thing is, it's going to be a 3-part special, because there's no way. There's just no way. I mean, this has been long, and you have to get Hammer. Like, I know he's busy, but you got to get. Player-wise, I'm going to say Prosper. I'm going to say, because I would. It's easy for me to say anybody from our time, which is you guys. Or was basically, you guys with my time at Siena. But I think, like, Prost is a different dude, man. I mean, he's Canadian, he's French-Canadian, unbelievable player, MAC champion, former European pro, played for Team Canada, ran his own scouting business, and now he's the head scout, lead scout at Orlando in the NBA. I mean, that's the dude right there. Yeah. I love Prost, and I got, all the time in the world for that guy. So I think he would be a very interesting podcast, because it's almost like, I don't know what exactly the Siena faithful feel are the great eras of Siena. I know there's the early years, and there's the Mike Dean years, and then there's Hewitt. Obviously, the stuff that happened with Fran and us, and then, hopefully what Coach Com's doing now. So I think if you're going to pluck those, you've got to go with Prost from the Hewitt years, because I just think he's going to have some amazing stuff to talk about.
Both those guys are on the list. Hammer, we're going to get him. We're going to try our best every way we can.
You buy him some coffee, something. Like, we got to go.
When we ask him, like, who's his favorite player, he could have stories and stories, which is great. Yeah. That's what the fans want to hear. But I know he's going to say Mark Brown without even asking him. So.
Oh yeah.
Which, hey.
Just say, your favorite player is Mark Brown.
Yeah. Why is he your favorite player?
Yeah.
No, but definitely appreciate your time. Dr. Dan Taylor, episode 5. Make sure you follow us on all our social media accounts, _stories podcast. We're up to date. Make sure you subscribe also on our official YouTube page. But we appreciate it, Dan. Thanks for your time, Dr. Dan Taylor.
All right. Thank you. Love you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.